Two people can speak, but then what about how a brand projects itself, right? So that was something that really caught my attention. And I decided that when we were working at the agency, it was all about just the media alone. But now it's taken so many different forms, right? You can tell your story. Because to be honest, like what we do is completely behind the scenes. We're never in the picture. It's always know of so many ex-colleagues of mine who very smartly, every 2 years, every 3 years, they jump agencies, and that way you're able to sort of get.
Hi, Nina. Nina, you are our first guest in StuCred's this mission of taking useful information for students and parents who are trying to help their children make the right decision, with respect to their career choices. And I'm so glad that you're here. Welcome. Thank you for giving us your time.
Hi, Rashmi. Thank you so much for having me. I think the pleasure is all mine.
So, Nina, you are the global communications head at Kissflow, which is one of the leading SaaS players based in Chennai. How has this journey been? Like, what led you to this position that you are in today?
Sure. I think my answer is going to be a little long-winded, but I did my schooling at St. Michael's Academy. Post which, I think when I was doing my 12th, I thought journalism was going to be my true calling. So I did my undergrad in journalism at MOP Vaishnav, and it was a very intensive program because at MOP they believe in internships, and every year you're expected to do like one or two internships during the summer break, and that's something that the college insists on. So I did a couple of internships. I was a part-time writer at Inbox 1305. That was a popular lifestyle magazine then. I did an internship at Press Trust of India as well. But something about journalism was not attracting me so much. I knew I was, not so sure about what I wanted to do. And then in my final year, we had a paper on PR and corporate communication. And I think, the way the teacher explained the subject and the kind of example she used and understanding how brands would communicate, right? I think that's what attracted me. I found that very interesting. See, it's okay, two people can speak, but then what about how a brand projects itself? Right, so that was something that really caught my attention, and I decided that was something that I wanted to try out. So soon after I completed my undergrad, I did my master's in media management at MOP itself, and that particular course had everything to do with the business of media, right? So the business of advertising, the business of public relations, and so on. So I did that course, and it's a 2-year course as well. I finished that course, and at the end of my first year, we were expected to do an internship. So I obviously picked a PR agency, and that's when I went and interned at 2020 MSL Chennai, which is a tech PR firm. So I did about a 6-week, very intensive internship training program where every day would be like a 9 to 5, sometimes even a 9 to 7, and I was given like assignments to do on a weekly basis that were quite exhausting, so to speak, because you're expected to read articles, you're expected to understand how like a set brand was communicating. At that point, some assignments I was given was based on a very popular flight company. So, seeing the articles that were coming out every day, cutting those clips, putting it together, analyzing it, all of that piqued my interest. So then I knew that was something that I wanted to, sort of focus on and rather build my career in. Then when I was almost finishing my course, it was that I was facing this eternal conundrum, right? You're wondering whether you want to join a PR agency or you want to join a corporate company. Do you get directly into corporate communications, or how do you sort of figure that out? That's when I spoke to some people I work with at 2020 itself, and they very neatly explained it to me. And they said that when you work at an agency, you get exposed to multiple verticals. You will work across startups, manufacturing, whatever the Chennai market's known for. And when you work with a corporate, it's just one company, one particular vertical, and so on. That could get boring. So I thought, okay, why not? Let me give this a shot. So I joined 2020 MSL in February 2014. And in fact, when you're completing your course, you're expected to do a 3-month internship, right? So I spoke to the office, I spoke to college and said, I will start my internship itself as a job. Because anyway, when you start your job, you're a management trainee, which is as good as being an intern. And, except you're getting paid for it, that's all. And once you complete your first 6 months, that's when you get confirmed and your probation ends and so on. So I started my career there, and I was there for about 8.5 years. I got to work on multiple brands. And when I started, my clients were in the startup, manufacturing, and tech space. And I think that's where I realized that, I liked variety, and I liked working with companies of different sizes and different ages, right? Because when you work with manufacturing, you're working with CEOs who are like 50 plus. When you're working with startups, you're working with CEOs who are like 30 plus, and the ideologies are so different. So that's where I realized that, PR was something that I was truly interested in, and I really enjoyed every day of my job there.
You covered two very, very important points in your conversation. One is that internships are such a critical part of
Absolutely.
building your portfolio as a student for your future career. I meet a lot of aspiring students who are looking for internships. One common problem that I see nowadays is that people want to know what will I get? मुझे क्या मिलेगा? They don't understand that they need to see what will they get. I mean, they don't understand that they want to know quantifiable outcome of it. Will I get paid? How long? They don't understand that just being there itself and observing people adds so much value to their career. And the second point was you spoke about variety and being exposed to everything that you can learn in the early years of your career. The first 5 to 6 years of a career has to be just about learning, and I think that's something even I learned from my agency exposure in the first few years of my life. So that was very interesting. And how did you then end up at Kissflow?
I think, like I said, right, it was that choice between PR agencies or Copcom. And while I'd finished that 8.5 years at working at 2020 MSL, I think it was almost time for me to figure out what next in life, right? Because you start growing, you first work with 3 clients, and then you move to 5 clients, and then you work with like almost 10 brands. But then you're pretty much doing the same thing on a day in basis, right? So for me, it was all about like, do I move corporate? And if I move corporate, what kind of job would I take? And because I was already working with tech enterprises and all of that by then, when Kissflow reached out, I thought, that might be an interesting space for me to be in. So I decided to make the shift. It was just pretty much that. That's all. It was not too, I mean, I did think about it quite a bit because I didn't want to leave the agency that I was working with, because you're there at a place for 8.5 years. It feels like, you've known everybody for so long. But then sometimes learning is also important. And while at the PR agency level, I was only doing India PR. But when I joined Kissflow, I now get access to handling global comms, right? So that way I've got to learn how other markets perform, how you do PR in markets like Middle East, Southeast Asia, US even. So that way it's quite interesting. And you have to always look at learning opportunities. So I sort of weighed the pros and cons there. And when I realized there's a lot more learnings here, I was like, why not? Let me just try to, see what I can pick up from this particular role.
So your parents are not from this media background, or how is it that their support made an impact in your life in making your choice, your career choice?
Honestly, I think with my parents, they were just like, you choose whatever you think is right. From day one, I was given that sort of, encouragement. And not many people are lucky enough to get that, right? So they were like, okay, you took journalism, fine. You've taken journalism, all that is good. Now suddenly, you're shifting to PR. Are you sure this is something that you want to do? Is what my dad asked me. My mom's a homemaker. My dad was always in sales and marketing across manufacturing companies. So he was in a traveling job. So it just made sense for me to pick something here in Chennai so I can be grounded here as well, right? And I was not one of those who wanted to move to a different city or, explore a different region and all of that. I'm very comfortable and happy here. So when I joined 2020 MSL, they absolutely didn't understand what I did. So I would discuss these things with them, right? So I would tell them that, this is what my client said today, or this is the interview that I scheduled today. I met this journalist from this publication today. And that sort of, got them to understand. After a point, you would not believe it. Like my parents would look at the paper in the morning and they'd be like, hey, I've not seen your client in so many months. Is everything going okay with that client? And even today, right, like if Kissflow comes in the Times of India or in the Hindu or whatever publication, my dad will be the first one to send me that little snapshot. So, I mean, you have to also talk to them and make them understand, because there's so many changes that's happening, right? And for that generation to get the kind of job roles today, unless you keep that conversation going and keep them involved, they're never going to get it. So I think that was one thing I did, and now they completely get what I do. And they ask me very relevant questions. And, they're like, oh, how does this work in this market? How do you speak to a journalist in the US? How do they respond to you? And, questions like that.
If you were to explain your job, PR and communications today, right now, in a simple way, so that a lot of parents who don't understand why their kids are choosing this stream, how would you explain it? What does this job entail?
So I think it's like the perfect, marriage between a company and the media, right? You're just storytelling. That's all you're doing. You're telling a story from a company point of view, and you're finding mediums to tell it. Earlier, you remember, right, when we were working at the agency, it was all about just the media alone. But now it's taken so many different forms, right? You can tell your story on your own social media platforms today. You really don't have to depend on the media. So I think it's just all about, telling the right story, using the right platform, and using the right tools.
And I think an important part of our job is to champion the brand that we work for
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
show it to the right customer, because no matter how good the company is, as long as we don't explain it to the world, to the customers, it's just a best kept secret, right? It's not nothing.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
that's a very critical and crucial job, and I think that's how students should approach it, understanding the importance of this role for a lifetime of a company or for the future of a company. Do you remember as an intern, as a fresher, how did you start? Like, what are the salary scales a student can expect getting into a job like
When
this?
I started, I remember my salary was roughly around 18,000 or so. And then, of course, it slowly kept increasing. That's again dependent on, your performance and so on. I'm guessing the salary scale might have increased now because of inflation and so on. But 10 years ago, it was 18,000.
Right now there's this always misconception that the best paid jobs are in IT and all, but I don't think that's the case, right? I mean, even communications and this industries has competitive salary range.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think they do. It depends on which agency you join. And it's all about, how you perform as well, because you can scale really, really well in this particular industry, right? I know of so many ex-colleagues of mine who very smartly, every 2 years, every 3 years, they jump agencies. And that way you're able to sort of, get the ethos of the other agencies as well, work with different brands. And when you jump from job A to job B, you're always getting a 30-35% increment, right? At the minimum, that is. So that's another way in which people could consider scaling.
And this job, does it give you international, as in opportunities to travel abroad? Like, again, like in IT jobs, everybody travels abroad, and that's like students want that, right? Kids want to be in such jobs where they have just setting lifestyle. Does it also provide
But
that
you know
opportunity?
what? Some brands that you work with today, like if they have, for example, any operations in the US or they have operations in Europe or whatever, you do get to travel. You get to conduct media junkets. That's where you take a bunch of journalists from here and take them to a certain city somewhere in the world and spend 2-3 days and come back. So I think if you're lucky enough, then you might have those opportunities.
What is the biggest misconceptions that you see younger students coming in, younger aspiring PR and communication personnel coming in with, which you would like to bust about the job?
Everyone thinks this job is very glamorous, okay, but there's a lot that happens behind the scenes also, right? Because to be honest, like what we do is completely behind the scenes. We're never in the picture. It's always the spokespersons or the CEO who's in the picture. So we're the ones who are like understanding, why we're doing a certain event or why are we running a certain campaign. We're doing all that grunt work. So whenever I meet like youngsters or when I go to colleges and speak to like a couple of students, they all think that, we're the ones in the limelight and we're doing like really cool stuff and all of that. I mean, we are doing really cool stuff, but everything is like behind the scenes. So the sooner I think you realize that, it's the best.
And what would be the one thing that you would like to go back and tell your younger self if you had the chance to?
I think for one, it's you have to hustle hard, you have to work hard, but at the same time, you should also know, like like not get too stressed, right? Take it easy once in a while, like work hard, but also make sure that there is like a life beyond work as well. That is one thing I would tell my younger self, because I remember when for like almost like what 8 years of my life, it was all about just work for me. That's all, and I used to live really far off, so I had that long commute and everything, all of those things put together. But for me, it was only work, right? My whole life revolved around work. So I think if I would go back, I would just tell my younger self that while you have to work so hard, you can also like have some fun and not get too stressed and not overthink too much.
And what would the one thing you would like to tell students?
I think for students who want to pick this particular, course, I think for one, you will have to spend a lot of time reading understanding how brands are communicating, because that's changing rapidly, right? Like now with AI coming in, there is no requirement for example, content writers, right? Everybody can generate content these days using like, AI tools and so on. And if that gives you content which is 50%, all you need to do is just polish it up or whatever and, send that out. So I think for one, it's very important to do a lot of, you need to understand how the industry works. Try to meet as many people as possible. Like try to reach out to people through LinkedIn, have conversations with folks in industries, because people like us, I get a lot of requests from students saying, hey, can I, send you an email? Can I ask you a couple of questions? Would you be able to answer? And I oblige, because, they really need these details and I'm happy to give them that, right? So that's one thing. Reach out to people via LinkedIn, try to make connections, read, most important, right? Read as much as possible, look at what are some of the new trends that's happening, be completely updated with marketing trends, branding trends, all of those things. And then just generally, do internships. That's, I think, the best thing ever. Do as many internships as possible and then figure out where your true interest lies. And I mean, if PR is not meant for you, then you can always choose something else instead of starting your career somewhere and then being absolutely unhappy at it.
Thanks, Nina. It was so interesting, this conversation. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put your LinkedIn profile in the description of this episode, so that a lot of students and parents who would want to know more about this field and help their kids, or children who want to help themselves, they can reach out to you maybe.
I'll be the happiest to do that, actually. No problem at all.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, guys, stay tuned for the next episode. We will be having amazing speakers every week coming in from different industries, and this is your chance to learn from the best of the best in the industry. So, stay tuned.